Welcome to today's featured session, Convenience Wins, Marketing and Patient Experience Strategies for the Modern Consumer, sponsored by Podium. I'm Anuja Vaidya with Becker's Hospital Review. I am pleased to introduce our speakers, Craig Daly, Vice President of Healthcare Solutions at Podium, and Robin Zabrowski, Vice President of Strategic Marketing and Communications at Monument Health. We thank both Craig and Robin for joining us today, and I am pleased to turn the floor over to Craig to start today's presentation.
Anuja, thank you. Thank you for having us. I want to introduce someone that I feel is a dear kind of friend and client to Podium, which is Robin. And I'm going to start things off maybe with a little bit of a curveball, Robin, excuse me. When we were out in South Dakota, we were on site with Robin's team a couple of years ago now or so. And we had about a 2-hour gap where we could go see Mount Rushmore. Literally, Robin told us, you got to go see it before you fly away, right? You got to get there on the background of the wall. Robin literally just threw us the keys to her car and said, have at it. We went out there, had a great time. But just to speak to the caliber of human being who we have with us today. So Robin, one, I know I've told that story too many times, but
going to Mount Rushmore, so thanks.
Yeah, it was a blast. And there was literally nobody there, so it was perfect for us. Usually those things are packed. So, but yeah, really excited about this topic. As you look at any of the macro trends that are happening in any more of the consumerized sectors, such as retail, you start to see a lot of big factors where convenience is a huge, advantage if you can break it down. You look at the homepage of Google, the simplicity of a search bar. Uber disrupted the taxi industry overnight by converting drivers into taxis and making it just incredibly simple to utilize services. But as consumers, we constantly clamor for convenience. Convenience is rarely something that complex health systems and health organizations are able to truly tackle. It's one that they're always trying to focus on, but we want to talk today about how important convenience is and what are some ways that organizations today are truly winning in that regard. So just into the new normal, a phrase we've said often. I'd say there's probably every organization, regardless of sector, we're talking a lot about where the current state of things. COVID has introduced a whole host of complications in terms of how we interact with our friends and family, let alone how does business resume. Healthcare in particular has been hit incredibly hard. And talking with Robin, even prior to this, we talked a lot about some of the operational changes that their organization had to make in preparation. And health systems around the globe really were bracing for impact. Many of those organizations, were just inundated with calls, with patients coming in through the door, to the point where they were leasing and renting additional buildings. But there's been a hard, task for these organizations, one, to either manage some of the changes that were anticipated or that were literally kind of left on their front door with patients clamoring for help. Robin, I was going to just turn the time to you for a second and maybe speak a little bit about what were some of the adjustments or even just like the mindset for Monument Health as you approached COVID and what you anticipated happening.
It's certainly been an interesting time. When we began this journey, we were prepared to serve up to 500 additional patients in our 400-bed hospital. So we were, and that's our primary hospital. We serve the entire western half of South Dakota, and then branching into North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, and Nebraska. So we really are the singular healthcare system to support our region. And in order to double our capacity, we really had to get creative, not only with space, but with staffing. We all know there are shortages with healthcare workers across the country. So we really had to think about, if we had this influx of patients, how would we handle serving them and caring for them? Also from a technology standpoint, where we have been working on telehealth for a couple of years, I would say, we literally had to stand it up in a matter of weeks, where going through normal processes, it probably would have taken another year. So definitely interesting times.
Yeah. And even though it was under unfortunate circumstances, I bet you love the ability to have things move that quick.
Oh
Which is
yeah,
that definitely uncommon.
all the time, absolutely.
Yeah, so we saw some trends and just some interesting stats. If you looked at the past year, 9% of the actual telehealth, of all visits happened through telehealth. Now, fast forward to these last few months here in 2020, we've seen an increase all the way up to 51%. Right? Will that norm hold? I doubt it. We do see a massive trend, but even still, post-pandemic, it's expected to double from 9% actually to 21%. So there's a huge demand and some learnings that came out of telehealth. I think there's been some interesting dialogue though, and just discussion in general about the use of technology, especially in a sector of healthcare where there's such a level of empathy and personable skill set that is required. And even some trends, Robin, that I know for Monument Health in particular that were fascinating. Because the norm seems a little bit of like telehealth, everyone's going to focus strictly on these virtual visits going forward, but trends would say otherwise.
Yeah, we saw a ramp up. You can see when we launched our telehealth offering in early March, it ramped up slowly. And as our visits declined because we were closing clinics and limiting patients to only urgent care, we did reach up to 23% of our total mix of how we were serving our patients. But overall, it has been 10%. So it's right in line with those numbers that you shared, Craig. I think the surprise for us, if you look at the trend line from around July 4th, as soon as our clinics fully reopened, patients immediately began coming back. We thought that would be a slower incline, but patients wanted to see their providers. They were craving that interaction. And we expect telehealth to be a very important part of our patient service platform going forward, but there's nothing that replaces face-to-face in today's world.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating. I'm just thinking like socially, I just had a conversation with some friends where they were talking about Marco Polo. And they were talking about actually how their family had a Facebook page to basically consolidate a lot of the conversations they were having with one another, but it fizzled out. It seemed like it would be an appropriate channel to actually have conversations, but Marco Polo, ironically, because it had the actual video, the face-to-face, is something that their family uses often. But it makes me think, just in your trends, the patients, while we love technology, it's really important to always focus on that it being very human. So we do see convenience, but it's got to be in a way where you don't lose some of the personable attributes that one would have where you're engaging face-to-face, right? So video obviously being a key component in that, but just making sure in the journey, there's got to be some kind of like true face-to-face interaction. We feel that there's 7 key patient interactions, right? And I'd say this is, somewhat standard and varying, obviously, depending on demographics, maybe some specialties that the actual health system is focusing on, but essentially patient finds and chooses you. So they pull out their phone and begin a search query for whatever it might be. They reach out with questions, they schedule that office visit. Post-visit, we're soliciting feedback through like an HCAHPS or just some basic social surveying to gauge how did we do. And then there's that post-visit follow-up. And how did the healthcare that we provided actually work? Are we trying to reduce readmittance rates? We want to make sure that a patient post-appointment has the proper follow-up and information. And then bill payment, something that again has been historically really challenging for systems, one, to collect, but also incredibly confusing from the patient standpoint. We still get letters in the mail saying, here's what you owe, but this is not a bill, right? So there's these different kind of red light, green light moments in these journeys. And then obviously a return visit, trying to keep the patient back within the system and within the ecosystem of that group. Something that seems a little bit misaligned with those touch points is 60% of businesses believe customers prefer to engage with a business through phone calls, while 89% of the actual consumers prefer to engage with a business through texting or a messaging app. And again, you see this massive hockey stick trend in terms of mobile interactions, and a lot of these organizations like Apple and Facebook really trailblazing the way businesses interact with their customer base or patient base. It's a telling sign of patients want simplicity. They want to engage with that organization, but to Robin's earlier point, with some of those trends, there still needs to be these human interactions and kind of an authentic dialogue. It can't be purely automated digital interactions. There's 4 key ways that we're going to get into the meat of this now to manage these critical touch points. The first one being communicate in the preferred channels. And again, I keep referencing a little bit of just thinking logically about your own personal lives. How do you engage with those around you? What is that process? Do you typically dial? Do you typically call? Do you hear a voice? Do you FaceTime? Do you message? Do you use social channels? So 96% of healthcare complaints are typically derived around customer service. So attributes, if I'm not mistaken, I think even the number 1 is with the front desk admin, but oftentimes it's just communication, it's directions, it's misinformation. It's not specifically the services that were actually rendered by, say, a primary care provider and their staff. Now, 89% of those consumers are also saying they want the option to message directly. So there's this overwhelming demand where patients want simplicity in how they interact. And one of the biggest barriers or challenges are those organizations that, are challenged with trying to adopt messaging. Robin, this is an incredibly challenging feat. So I don't want to make light of, hey, why doesn't everybody just text? Nor do I want to assume that you just completely convert to texting. We didn't completely convert to email from traditional mail, right? This is a trend that is very much a long tail strategy that organizations need to adopt. But what is your gut in relation to texting in general within health systems? Do you feel that it will be adopted? Do you feel that patients are truly demanding it? Just curious for your take on what you've heard or seen in your discussions.
I do believe it's going to be an important part of our communication platform. We've launched texting for careers, and I'm going to talk more about that as we move along. Our next wave will be for billing. And we text patients reminders about their bills today, but what we don't, it's not a two-way communication. And so I really think that that's what's important. And I think that's where we'll build a relationship via texting instead of it just being us sending them that one-way text that says, hey, you owe $245. It's we noticed that you owe $245. May we answer any questions for you? And really starting to build that communication with them. I also think that the next opportunity for us is bringing it all together. When we talk about all of the different ways that we're touching our patients across that spectrum that you talked about a little bit ago, Craig, from pre-visit to post-visit, patients expect that anybody that they talk to knows their full patient journey. And our technology stack today does not allow for that because we're having different conversations in different platforms. So the opportunity is to bring it all together so that if I log in and I'm chatting with you, Craig, I can see the full past history. It's CRM essentially, but tying it into that texting and that real-time communication. And then if they have another question tomorrow, they can just message in and they can feel like it's a concierge type model where they can get their answers when they want them.
Yeah, and I think to the recurring theme, to your point, Robin, like that also enables more of a human touch to it, or it kind of humanizes the brand. In this case, say Monument Health, in that I can save you as a contact in my phone, and if I had a question about the appointment, if I need to adjust if I need to adjust the time of my appointment, can't make it, being able to just fire a text off like you and I would, interacting back and forth. I think this says a lot about the brand versus it saying, hey, you've reached a number that can't be replied to. It's coming from 8535. And to your point, I think that's what we've tried to focus on, even from a product standpoint, not to plug Podium, but I think in the race to stand up digital interactions, a lot of health systems were just doubling down saying, okay, we need, web chat solutions. We need symptom checkers for COVID. We need telehealth products. We need to do everything digitally. But you enlisted a host of technologies to accomplish that. But an unintended consequence, to your point, was they weren't talking to each other, right? And operationally for a CIO and CTO to actually connect all those different interactions so that they are seamless, at least from a patient's perspective, let alone the organization's, is an immense, if not impossible feat to do it clean, right? So I think it's a good point to think, am I creating dead ends? Am I creating processes? You and I were even talking about that a little bit, where you're going through a decision tree on a phone call, saying press 1, or and before you know it, 60 seconds in, if you're like me, you're yelling, representative, human, get me somebody, right? So thinking of the technology that you would be deploying, think of it through the consumer's eyes or the patient's eyes in this moment. Am I actually breaking down the barriers, or am I just simply making my processes on the company side more efficient? Because you will miss the mark drastically and only infuriate implementing technologies that just create further dead ends in a patient journey.
And building that relationship, absolutely.
Yep. Now, video chat obviously is fascinating, and I've heard some really cool stories, as well as to your point, where patients have also been clamoring, I want to get back into and actually see my doctor. Some instances, as we've looked at offering video chat, patients have actually responded saying, I feel like I have more of my provider's time, right? Rather than keying into a computer and kind of looking over, checking some vitals, they felt like Robin and I, as we're talking right now, can actually look at each other and have a conversation without any distractions, without maybe keying in some of this information. So I know there's been a lot of positives to patient sentiment there. And there's also, some negatives, depending on, is that purely the relationship that you'd have? Is it purely digital? Again, there's a really good mix of where you'd want definitely some human interaction to offset some of the, more digital interactions that people, again, are seeking. Anything you'd add to that, Robin, that we haven't hit on already? Okay.
No, just what you see on the screen now, and that is that we launched into video chat and online chat and texting really with careers. COVID-19, just like we talked about earlier with telehealth, it really allowed us to spread our wings and think about how we would connect with potential future caregivers when we couldn't do in-person job fairs and we couldn't go to events, which was how we used to recruit. So this has been a whole new world for us. We've done Facebook Live, career chats. We're allowing, as you can see on the screen, people to just chat with us. And we found it to be really successful because it's more anonymous. The chatting online, I think feels safe. So it's a big step for someone to pick up the phone and call, knowing that they are so loyal to their employer and they don't want their employer to find out. But chatting online, we've found through these candidates, it does feel safe and it feels more just like they're investigating. However, we are seeing that turn into hires. If we can live chat with someone, we're seeing 38% of those chats turn into applications. And of those applications, 22% of the people that applied are turning into hires. So
Wow.
We're really happy with how technology is enabling us to think differently about recruitment via both video chat and texting and online chat.
It's a fascinating conversion on the 22% in particular. So remember again, on the 38%, that was applicants applying that have actually engaged through text.
Yeah.
Which I think is fascinating, just because of the 22% conversion, I feel like would mean there's probably some dialogue where they've kind of vetted it out, both you and the actual recruit. They've had some discussion. So they've kind of already made up their mind through some of the dialogue that's taking place through text, hence a really strong conversion there.
Yeah.
Love that use case.
One other thing I would add, and it ties back to what we were talking about a little bit ago, it's an open conversation. So once they start texting with us, back to the old world where they'd pick up the phone and they'd call and they'd talk to a recruiter, they'd hang up the phone, and then they'd probably think of 5 more questions they wish they would have asked, or
Right.
talk to their friend or their spouse that night and they think, oh, I should have asked this. Where once we've opened that conversation via text or online chat, they can just bounce those questions back to the recruiters, and we're able to serve them extended hours. We're able to be much more responsive, and I think that is what's leading to the higher conversion rate than what we would have seen before with just phone calls.
Yeah, I love that use case. I think our founder Eric would be crying somewhere if he was hearing this right now. But just because you think about the traditional digital interactions, if it was an automated thread that helped the business handle the quantity of conversations, as Robin, you'd be texting in as a candidate saying, tell me a little bit about culture. What are the things that you guys really care about? A typical technology would reply, sorry, did you have questions about culture? Well, culture is defined as, it just feels obviously impersonal. I'm never going to text back on that thread. The conversation dies. To your point, I've kind of lost my interest versus I can keep that conversation alive through, again, a channel that I currently use in my day-to-day. Love the use case.
When we started, I mean, yeah, think about the future potential. So if someone says that about culture, you're right. In the old world, we would have said, oh, let us take you to the culture landing page. But
Right.
in the future, if we can say, hey, what floor do you think you want to work on? Let's schedule a virtual visit and we can take you there. So there's so much potential.
Yeah, I love it. Well, good. Yeah, I mean, we'll keep talking through this thread. 2/3 of consumers prefer to text a business. We've talked about the emphasis, obviously, in terms of that demand being there. Yet only 17% of patients currently engage with their providers via text. For anyone watching this that is saying, well, yeah, no duh, we have HIPAA. There's immense compliance standards, and at least Podium as an organization are incredibly aware of the two-way messaging components, the pitfalls, and some of the challenges that exist with SMS texting. One thing I would say is working with an organization that is proven in the healthcare space, but also understanding the conversation has to go secure in some kind of fashion. So text can be like an SMS message can be the vehicle to initiate the conversation, but as patients actually want to engage on any kind of personal health information that might be disclosed, any kind of compliancy with HIPAA, it's important to understand, use text as the medium, but you're going to need to open up a web browser session and actually be in a secured environment to host that conversation. But there are avenues where text, it can still bring about the convenience. And then you need to couple that with certain technologies just to ensure from a compliance standpoint that it's all sound, both for the patient, obviously, and the business itself. So anyone rolling their eyes, there's answers. So our second point, keep in touch before, after, and between appointments. And Robin, I know I talked to you a little bit about this. One of the trickiest things that organizations, I feel like, that we engage with is how do we keep people in network? I know post-appointment, this is something that's fascinating to me, is that nearly 70% of patients report that they specifically want more communication after they leave the office and before they return for their scheduled visits. It's the recall piece that I find most fascinating. That in a study, patients found they recall 40% of the advice and instructions. So this plays right in line with the candidates, with patients, and just general consumers. I think this is something we try to stress even from a product standpoint at Podium is, if I hang up my telehealth call and I forget what Robin had described to me as far as like foods to stay away from, or an over-the-counter medicine that I should check out to help me in the interim before my appointment. A lot of times, if I wanted to actually ask a follow-up question, that conversation died with typical technologies. My ability to text back in, call back in, I basically need to restart my journey, call the clinic, set up a time, get sent a link, download an app. The effort required today for patients to have two-way messaging in what feels like a very frictionless fashion is pretty immense. So be thinking a little bit of how do I break down those barriers? Can I, just like we're talking about with these candidates, it's an exact use case with a provider. I'd say, hey, remind me again, you said to steer away from what foods, or that I need to check out which medications that might help me. But I think just having that asynchronous communication, like we were hitting on earlier, is a very powerful mechanism, especially given some of the stats we're showing here. So furthermore, talking about this, the one-to-one digital experience. So text messaging most often is used in scheduling appointments, appointment reminders. And Robin, I think you said Monument today, you do this conversation right now through text, not purely, but sorry, when I say conversation, appointment reminders, yeah, or confirmations, correct, yeah. How long ago did you implement that? And was it email prior?
Yeah, we implemented our electronic health record, Epic, almost 3 years ago now, and those appointment reminders are triggered from Epic. So that's one way today. Where we want to get to then is more of what you see on the screen, where they get that reminder, but there really isn't an action if that doesn't work anymore, then they have to call the clinic or go into their MyChart app and see if they can make the change. But we really want to simplify that, and in the future allow for a really simple communication with someone.
Yeah. And I think this also could be very daunting for organizations that are like, man, if we're doing two-way conversations, we would need to have 1,000-person call center. We would need to have, various staff, various operational changes, and sure, there unquestionably will be some change management. But this is a very worthwhile and necessary venture. But I would also say, think of a crawl, walk, run. A lot of the organizations that we will showcase our product to easily nod their head and say, yes, 100%, we see these trends happening, but where do we start? And I think that's what's usually a pretty big gap. We have some organizations that literally will implement on their hold line saying, hey, if you'd prefer not to wait, feel free to text us at this number, right? And they mark off maybe a small single-digit percentage of their call center that is managing a lot of these two-way interactions through text. But the key differentiator in that what seems like a pretty small lift operationally is that individual at the call center can actually manage 10 to 15 conversations at once, whereas a traditional call center individual is on the phone with Kevin or Catherine as they're trying to fumble through their wallet or purse for an insurance card. So there's some effective mediums that you can really start to just do simple steps forward that can really help move the needle for a lot of patients that are interested in this messaging. This is definitely an interesting one, especially given COVID. A huge request that came to our company a lot was help us manage a lot of the conversations that are coming in, because literally our phones are running, ringing off the hook to the point where we had a lot of organizations having patients park, in specific stalls, and then they would want to literally pick up the phone to call the patients, but were unable to because there was just a constant ringing, right? But obviously we want to instill trust. And that as an organization, we're responsible. So improving the waiting room safety, keeping it empty, having patients wait in the car. Again, that's where solutions like this, where you're able to text in and say, hey, I'm ready, or hey, I've arrived, allow this two-way dialogue and operationally allow the actual urgent care or whatever business unit that is needing to engage with these patients to be really effective in their channels. This was exposed obviously a lot more just given COVID. And, I would say it's very non-traditional in the sense of phones aren't always ringing off the hook, but as patient volumes increase, text tends to be a route that can allow for, very strong quantity of communication. Showing up in online search results. So Robin and our team have done a ton of work together in this regard. And I think I want to highlight a lot of what Monument has done. Before we get into some of the Monument success, Robin, and pass it to you, I want to share with the audience members watching this. Google has mimicked a lot of the best attributes that Amazon has. In that, as consumers, we search for a flashlight, a camping tent, a scooter for our kids. And Amazon's end goal is to try to get you to transact. So to do that, they serve up the most reputable products, ones that are Amazon verified, ones that have the best reputation, in hopes that you find exactly what you're looking for. And reviews have become an increasingly strong influence in determining who Google identifies. So when I say Google mirroring Amazon, it's that when I pull out my phone and look for a dentist, look for an urgent care, Google, in a similar fashion to Amazon, is basically sifting through all the considerations that exist and saying, for Craig, what is the most reputable business that seems to have delighted customers? If Craig can enjoy his experience with that business, he'll continue coming back for Google for any of my search queries. So near me searches, which oftentimes, without even having to say near me, if I search dentist, it would automatically assume that I'm looking for a specific location, just like it would with nearly any healthcare search query. But there's been a 200 increase just in the last 2 years of those near me searches. So Google is fast becoming more and more hyper-local. And the portion of reviews that actually play into what we call the map pack, or that kind of list of who made the cut, is constantly increasing with reviews. So reviews today actually make up 34% of the algorithm for those local searches. Just some quick tips on these actual rankings. As those search results are manifested here, that first spot that you're seeing there It gets 42% of the clicks. Second is 24% of the clicks, and then 11% of the clicks. You may not be able to see it super well here, but there's this 4.0 rating that is actually marked red. In this particular screenshot or example that you're seeing, this is where an individual would have searched best. So best urgent care near me, best OBGYN, for best ENT, whatever the query might be. And what Google is basically doing with that rating is saying anytime somebody searches best, it's going to automatically eliminate anyone that is a sub 4.0. Right? And for our clients, where we tend to see a pretty big uptick as they go above this cliff of 4.0 is when they're capitalizing now on all this best search traffic. So again, for those watching, it'd be good to do a good audit of your locations. How many of those are actually below 4.0? And then how many of those are just misrepresenting the brand, right? So, but the things to consider, overall star rating obviously matters. The quality of the reviews, meaning is there context into it or is it just ratings? Are they speaking specifically about what the patient experience was like? The quantity of reviews itself, how many people are actually proving that this is a legitimate business? The frequency of reviews is an interesting one, meaning that an organization can't just do a blitz and think for 6 months they flooded their Google My Business pages and hope that that would last forever. Google is constantly looking at the authenticity of the business and uses that frequency of reviews a little bit kind of like a continual FICO score. How's it trending? What is your current snapshot of business reputation? And then also responding to the reviews. And Robin, I think that's even something your team has done really well. You're never going to be able to please everybody. And even for those that were delighted, I still think a kind of a kudos and hey, thank you for this feedback goes a long way to promote additional feedback for better or worse. But I'd love to have Robin speak a little bit. Oh, sorry, Robin, before we get into your section, I was just going to say this goes back to what we're talking about with urgent care, with near me searches. But in this graph, what I think is fascinating, if you went back to 2014, if you can subtly see it down here, we've had a massive hockey stick. But what you're actually seeing here in this screen, this massive trend, is literally the interest over time by percentile. So over the last 6 years, you can see over a 400% increase just in this search term, say urgent care near me. Now this will be consistent across nearly every query, but all these queries have just had a massive uptick. But one thing that's really fascinating, we've talked a lot about meeting customers or patients where they are and in the channels that they choose to communicate. And a lot of that is mobile. That's where 99% of my communication happens. It could be through social apps, again, through texting, but mobile makes up 88% of all those searches. So as you're thinking a little bit about your strategy in terms of like patient acquisition or interaction, is it mobile friendly? Am I meeting the consumers where they are? And as somebody pulls out their phone, am I actually capitalizing on this trend of search inquiries that are taking place? Or are we archaic and completely a ghost, even though we've been here for 75 years, right? So the new norm for Google is very much, are you a reputable business and can we suggest you when people are looking for you? And if so, it's looking at some of those barometers of rating, quality of reviews, quantity of reviews, and so on. So this is just irrefutable data from Google saying the way consumers search has changed. And I would just ask yourself as you're watching this, am I capitalizing on this or am I actually being capitalized on by my competitors? Enough of me, Robin. I would love to hear from you a bit about some of the work we've done together. I think maybe I'd love your insight, Robin, about what resonated. Why did you even care to do this? Did you feel it was critical? Was it a like to have? Just kind of your take on like why even focus on the reviews like you have?
Yeah, we about a year ago, we just did a thorough audit of what our state of our Google reviews was. And we had some really great providers in our system that had one review. And if it was a poor review, it might not even been from a real patient of theirs, but that just was killing them in Google. And so we very quickly saw a need to drive our real patients to give us star ratings and comments and reviews. And 8 months have gone by since we launched. You can see the results on the screen. We're very pleased with where we're at today, but like Craig said, this is not a one-time project. This is the new norm for us as far as asking patients to give us feedback. that quick text that they get within 5 minutes of them leaving our clinic. They can very quickly on their mobile phone give us just push the button as far as which star rating you want to give us, or give a one-liner response is so important to us. As we look at the map pack that Craig showed you, we're seeing that we have increased in many of our key areas, and we're just seeing increases across the board. So 26.4% increase, as you saw, in average rating review. We've doubled our 5-star reviews. We're getting more calls. We're getting more clicks to our location pages. We've increased our search volume by 60% across Google. Here you can see where we were. I know that the gray, we were just pretty stagnant. You can see we were just getting a few reviews. Once we started asking our actual patients for reviews, you can see what happened. The only reason months 2, 3, 4, and 5 were lower was because that was COVID, and Google stopped publishing those reviews for a period of time for the most part. But we're right back up to where we want to be, and it's changing our business.
Robin, do you use the data in conjunction with some of the other patient experience data, such as CAHPS surveys? I'm curious if patient experience has their hand at all whatsoever in some of the feedback that's received through Google.
We absolutely do. Well, first of all, I want to say that we do look at every single comment and we respond. So if it's positive, like Craig mentioned, we thank them. If it was negative, a 1 or 2, we ask them to enter into a conversation offline. We try to take it offline and communicate with them and see what we can do for service recovery in that situation. Many times it was a misunderstanding, and we've seen in most cases, those people just want to be heard. So once they know that you actually saw their comment and you responded to them and you've addressed their concerns, they will go back in and change their review. Back to your question, Craig, we're just seeing that by being responsive and looking at that data, it is working with patient experience. We share all of the information with patient experience on a monthly basis and roll it up with our HCAHPS feedback to say, what are those trends? What's rolling to the top this month?
Love it. I think something that we try to counter a lot, just given the flow of Google reviews, is there's a lot of discussion around, well, am I gonna cannibalize my response rate of my CAHPS? I gotta have that obviously for reimbursements. Like, you need to have your minimum thresholds. Every organization I talk to says that, which completely makes sense. I think something that I've noticed that's fascinating, at least in the flow that Podium offers, is the simplicity of it allows a very high conversion or a representative sample. Like the average rating that we typically would see, and I don't know where it is right now with Monument Health in terms of average review rating gathered, is typically around a 4.7 to 4.8. And it's not that the business is handing out chocolate chip cookies at the front door now once they implement Podium. It's just that we're hearing from people that would never leave you feedback otherwise. And I think one of the things that's kind of an Achilles heel with some of the CAHPS surveys is they're pretty exhaustive. They're often distributed, through mail, right? And I know there's avenues, and I believe the Monument Health team even does a fair amount through text, which is fantastic. But I think getting that kind of more of a pulse can also help, solidify a really strong representation versus those that are willing to take 30 minutes of their time to go fill out a lengthy survey, often have a negative bias to say, I'm kind of ticked. I'm going to take the time and really send a message because I just did not love the interaction, right? Not that there's too much negative bias there, but I think it does help round off the edges of where are we glowing, and then, what are the opportunities for improvement when you couple those data points together.
Yeah, we were really concerned when we launched that it would impact our HCAHPS response. In fact, we launched a pilot at just one clinic, one of our larger clinics, multi-specialty clinic. And what we saw, and it doesn't quite make sense of why it impacts your HCAHPS this way. We would send the Google review request via Podium within 5 minutes of that encounter closing. So once the patient leaves the clinic, and then 2 or 3 days post-visit, they receive the text and an email asking for them to fill out their HCAHPS survey. We saw the response rate actually increase when we were asking them to do both. We believe it's a different segment, and we do have data showing that we're reaching different people because different people are responding to the two types of surveys. But in all, we're just getting way more feedback.
Yeah.
What you see on the screen, and I won't spend much time here, is just that overall, everything Craig's talked about has been our focus over the last year. We have really focused on our location data, making sure our listings are correct, both on our website, on our location pages, and what we're feeding all of the platforms. And it's really working to increase our search volume, making sure that those near me searches work, not just for the primary clinics for a specialist, for example, but if they have visiting clinics, we need to make sure that those near me searches are serving up their visiting clinic location as well. So it's just so important to have accurate data, and it always surprises me when we do a scrub every quarter at how inaccurate data just finds its way into the many listing platforms, and we clean it up through our listings partner.
Great. I love that, and I love seeing these increases there. Ensuring the reviews are online and visible. And again, Robin and the Monument Health team have done a phenomenal job of this, in that 90% of the consumers are reading these reviews, determining the quality of the business. Should I engage with this brand? And again, this is kind of a misconception, I feel, for a lot of the organizations, especially if they have a foothold in a city or market. They tend to rely a ton on that brand. But oftentimes, at least how Google is deeming the criteria, the brand is being very misrepresented by the silent majority that are taking the time going and leaving those reviews. So having a medium that is easy for those generally positive audiences that visit you is really key to make sure you're owning local search real estate, essentially. But 72% of consumers report that positive reviews obviously increase their trust in a brand. And I said that same thing with Amazon. It mitigates a lot of the risk when I can see that it has 3,000 reviews on that flashlight and a 4.8 rating, because I know I'm going to be cared for, and I will overlook a lot of the details maybe about that flashlight, just simply knowing this checks the boxes, everyone has loved it, and I in maybe a sheepish fashion follow suit and purchase that product, right? So businesses are very much judged in that same criteria with how Google has transformed and continues to evolve from a local search engine. The last topic we'll hit on, and I know we're kind of short on time here, is collecting payments via text message. We talked a little bit about how that is something that is challenging for organizations, and not to imply that bills don't get paid because the money doesn't exist, and there's a lot of claims and questioning. Robin had echoed it a little bit on this earlier, but again, from a product standpoint, something we focus on is texts get open, bills get paid. But allowing for that two-way dialogue has been an important asset as individuals have questions about their bill. What is the process? Am I typically calling an automated number, dialing in some crazy code, and trying to talk to somebody about what my portion is? It's usually pretty archaic and pretty painful from a patient standpoint. Robin, thoughts on, as far as relative to bills getting paid, texting? You mentioned there was, I think, some interest in doing that. Does Monument do anything to this end today?
No, we only send bill reminders out right now.
Okay.
This is the next phase of chat. So I talked about careers. This is the next phase for us, is for billing.
Yep. And again, at your convenience, you can have that dialogue, answer questions, if need be, jump on the phone. But again, on the focus of convenience winning, if patients can be delighted in this scenario where there's traditionally a lot of pain and heartache and complaints, this is a huge opportunity for systems to really delight the customer and differentiate from the traditional status quo that health systems have been plagued with. So how Podium can help. One of the biggest things that we focus on is just omni-channel experience. Robin's hit on that quite a bit. From a technology standpoint, we build technologies that focus on, one, how do we just simplify the experience from the consumer's point of view, in this case, our patients, but also do it in a way that's really sound for the business and effective in their time and their time to resolve incoming calls, the quantity of calls, the actual wait times, any of those metrics that would be important to a business. We really focus on solving. We do it through just trying to break down the barriers and making it very easy for those patients to connect on the website, to pay, to get the appointment reminders and have that conversation be a living conversation as you need to adjust schedules. And then really collecting feedback and just perfecting what does operational excellence look like. Again, where are we really delighting our patient base, and where are the opportunities both regionally or segments of the business that are suffering, and surfacing that data through some of the online reputation and or additional surveying you might do. So our interaction management platform is a start to finish, literally from the initial search inquiry all the way down to payment collection. But we focus on that, again, being in a single channel. So a patient does their search inquiry, we'd want to influence the results like we have with Robin and the Monument Health team. As they reach out for questions on the website, we can interact them through chat, similar to the candidates or the recruits that Robin's team does. And as they visit the office, we can engage with them on the appointment reminders, adjust times. We can collect feedback, whether it be Google or a traditional Net Promoter Score survey. And then also some of the interactions in the post-visit follow-up. Again, we talked a little bit about how patients struggle to recall a lot of the information post-visit. But if they have this avenue where I can save you in my phone as Monument Health and re-engage with that brand as I have questions about the visit, that continuity of conversation is incredibly valuable in cementing the brand, in this case, Monument Health, as a very a human organization, in the sense that we can engage and have that continuity of all the conversations we've had with the patient to date, and then simplifying the bill payment processes. So long-winded pitch for Podium, but our interaction management platform has been an incredible asset to organizations, fortunately, not only prior to COVID, but more so in this age where organizations are racing towards digital interactions, but wanting to do it in a way that is, again, very sound for the business, but also incredibly human and interactive for the patient. So it's a hard line to toe, especially in healthcare, but one that has gone phenomenally well. So we'll wrap up here. Anuja, sorry, let me say this first. Robin, thank you so much for participating in this. Again, we adore you and your team and the Monument Health team, and wish you all the best. And at some point when we can travel again, hope to be up there again. Yeah, wanted to turn the time either to Emma and Anuja for any of the Q&A, time permitting.
Thank you so much to both Craig and Robin for that fantastic presentation. We will now begin today's question and answer session. Please submit any questions you have by typing them into your control panel in the space labeled "Enter a question for staff" and clicking send. We will try to get through as many questions as we have time for. If we do not get to your question today, we will be sure to follow up with you directly. So we have a couple questions popping up here. Our first question is, how important do you believe convenience is to a healthcare patient versus other industries?
Robin, you want to take a crack, or you want me to go?
Sure. Sure. Healthcare has generally been a little behind other industries. In fact, I would say 15 years behind. If we think about financial services and how the way that we used to travel required traveler checks, you know, there's so many things about healthcare that are that archaic. And so convenience is absolutely key. I think as a industry, healthcare is behind, but I think we can very quickly catch up. I look at hotels and how they've gone to concierge type models, and that's really what people expect. And I think that's what they will begin to expect from healthcare also.
Could not agree more. I'm gonna quote an individual. I'll call him out so he has his recognition for it. The gentleman, Adam Rice, I thought said something very profound that I've said time and time again. Adam's with Common Spirit, and he mentioned, I think a lot of organizations such as his tend to think that their competitors are those that are in their backyard, or that's who they're competing with. But in reality, they're competing with what the most disruptive brands are, the Amazons and Googles, and ones that we as consumers have kind of set as our benchmark of consumer excellence. To Robin's exact point with hotels and the concierge, we've fast seen health systems actually making requests for, hey, when we bring somebody in to, see their OBGYN or, for delivery, could we shoot them a text saying, welcome to the facilities, and then actually give them kind of a remote in the sense that they can make requests, they can order, assistance through text, and they can have kind of a two-way dialogue. So in a very similar fashion, and to answer the question, I would say 100%. We're all consumers first. We expect very specific and convenient interactions. And I don't think healthcare is any different in terms of where there need to be some adaptations.
Great, thank you both for those insights. So another question we've had pop up here. We've worked to implement convenience strategies in the past, but how do you see these impacting brands today, especially during COVID-19?
Yeah, good question. I think I feel like I'm beating a dead horse a little bit, and Robin, feel free to add on to this if you want to. But in terms of implementing convenient strategies, you need to look holistically at that whole journey. So like an unintended consequence of just simply deploying digital interactions on a website or an appointment reminders or a payment solution is oftentimes that connection dies with that technology partner, right? They're really good at web chat. They're really good at, appointment reminders, whatever it might be. But if it's requiring the patient to begin again, you're creating frustrations while you as a business think you're eliminating them. So I would just try to keep an eye on, are my conversations with that patient actually connected to one another? And are they following the journey, or am I just continually making them restart time again? And any patients that have frustrations will often find their ways to competitors. I mean, you see it all the time. So the experience 100% matters. But I would just say, as you are implementing convenient strategies, are the touch points actually speaking to one another?
Great, thank you so much for that insightful response, Craig. With that, we will close out today's session as we are coming up against the end of our time here. I just want to thank Craig and Robin once again for their excellent presentation and Podium for sponsoring today's featured session. Enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe.